Beep, beep. My hat!
All right, so now what we have to do is we have to remove this mount. So in order to remove the mount, you can take these out. So for that, we will need our 2mm driver, and it's just 4 screws, 1, 2, 3, 4. And this is adjustable, that's why you have the 4 slots here. So once we remove this mount, we will have easier access to the 2 screws back here to remove the actual rear mount from the transmission. Now, these will eventually wear out, especially if you crash, bash, if you're mainly on concrete, to be honest, if you slide, they will wear out. So sometimes you do have to replace these. But other times, you end up just replacing the rear tower. And to be honest, the only reason why you replace the rear tower is if you have a rear tower that has more adjustments. Other than that, this rear tower, it should not break under bashing conditions. It's very sturdy. So if you get another tower that has more mounting options for the rear shocks, that's the reason why you would replace it. All right, once you have that, you can go ahead and remove these 2 screws. There's one in here and this one right over here. If you do have the shock tower, you can bend this back, but I'm not going to stress the plastic. So I'm just going to remove this. And one of the reasons, other reason why you may have to remove this rear shock tower is to get these links off. Sometimes they do break, not the metal portion, but the plastic, the threads. If you take a hard enough hit on the side, you will ruin the threads inside of the plastic, and you will have to replace those end links. And that's the reason why you may have to remove this just to get to these screws here. But this is the rear tower. So for this here, you need a 2.5mm driver. I'm going to leave the screws there. And I'm going to take these out. Now notice the orientation. This part with the metal, that goes outside, and the other part is going to go on the inside. So when I set it on my table, that's how I'm going to set it. And remember, these go rear to front. And that is it. So I'm just going to set them like this. I'm going to set that there. And now you just have the transmission. Alright, so the transmission, you may have to crack open this transmission to replace this plastic housing. And the reason why you would have to do that is because sometimes these break. You take a hard enough hit on the rear arm doesn't give. Maybe you have the Proline arms, which are a lot stronger, and you end up breaking this portion here. So first thing you want to do, actually I don't have to remove that yet. I'm going to remove, no, I will remove it. You need a 7mm driver, and you're just going to hold the spur like this, just nice and tight. You're just going to loosen, and this will come out. Now, something that's happening to me right now is these are spinning. These are where the shafts are, and that is why I cannot loosen them. So I'm actually going to hold them with my hands. And if you just hold the flat spot, you will be able to. Sometimes, if not, one of the things that you can do is you can just put some little pins there. If you use body clips, for example, I have some body clips here. You can just use 2 body clips. If you can't get a good enough grip, just place one there. Place another one here. And then the body clips will hold it just like that so they don't spin, and then you can remove the nut. So that's a little trick that you can use. You can just remove the body clips after that. This will come out, so you have your clutch pads. You may have to remove them. This is your friction disc right here. So this I'm just going to keep together. And I'm going to put this over here. And this here just pops out. So you're just going to pull this plate out. Keep that with your clutch. And then there's just a little pin in here, and you remove that pin. And that is it. So now you can go ahead and start removing all of these screws. So you have a total of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 screws. And for these, you will be using your 2mm driver. One thing to keep note is there is a piece of tape here on the bottom, and that's because there's actually a hole there. So when the 2 halves come together, there is a hole in there, and that tape holds the grease, and that is the only thing it does because that's where the differential is. So if you need to grease your differential, you just lift that tape. You don't have to take apart the entire transmission housing. That's what that tape is for. I will be showing you shortly once I finish removing 4 screws, including this one here. I'm using my hand this way so the transmission doesn't spin. Right. And this transmission here is off of a VXL model, as you saw as I was removing the motor. So the internals are going to look different than a non-VXL transmission. All right, 2 more screws. And you can use power tools. I like doing things by hand when it comes to RCs. I'm used to it. To back these out, you can use a power tool. Just make sure you go slow. If you go too fast, you're going to ruin the threads. When you're putting everything back together, again, go slow. Just get it close and then do it by hand. That's the way I would recommend doing it so you don't mess up the plastic because you're going into plastic. If you're going into aluminum, then you have to be careful for a variety of other reasons. You don't want to break the screw or you don't want to damage the aluminum casing. At least plastic, if you mess up the threads, you can use a little bit of CA glue, crazy glue, super glue. Just put some in there and usually that'll work. But aluminum, that's a different story. Alright, so these screws should all be loose. At this point you can just pull apart, and this little piece of tape here, you can just lift, and I'm actually going to lift here, this other section, and this is how you would grease your gears. You would just lift on the tape. You only have to lift half of it, and that's where your gears are, so you can see the grease. So you would just apply grease there, and then you would just turn the lay shaft, and that's how everything gets greased up. So I'm just going to flip this over, and then you just lift, and that is it. So this is how you get into transmission. The lay shaft, this is a part that breaks often. There's that little pin in there. It's a little roll pin, and you can't see it very well on the camera. but it looks like this, just like that. It's a little roll pin. So that's the part number 3793. If you ever hear a winding sound like a woo, woo, and your vehicle sort of pulls forward and then stops, doesn't really run, or it pulls forward really slowly, but it gets stopped by just little rock, foot, whatever, there isn't much power, more than likely that pin has broken. So you're going to have to replace that. But one of the things that I want you to also notice about the VXL version is the VXL is all metal gears. This is metal, that is metal, that is metal. All right, so that is it. These just slide in, slide out. If you're replacing your differential, you would just slide this out. Notice the orientation. This is left, that is right. It just slides in once you're installing it. And that is it. So that is the breakdown of the rear end of a Traxxas / two-wheel drive.